missing the first time, we do this every week from middle of October to the middle of May. And this is the end of our 14th year. And Tom is our 396th speaker.
Can you believe that?
Gotta be something.
We keep thinking we're going to run out of speakers, but we just keep finding more and more that we know we miss a lot of history, but we have a lot of good history recorded, and we have a lot of fun. Some of you have been with me for 14 years. I know that. I appreciate it. But we're glad to have Tom here. And Tom, if you'll say something into that little microphone, and let's check the sound, and we'll begin.
Does this sound okay?
Yeah. Okay, is it loud enough everywhere?
I can hear myself. That's all that matters.
You're on.
Okay. Before we start, I just want to thank a whole bunch of my family, my wife's family, that have come from this part, most of them from Cache Valley. And from Cache Valley, she wasn't originally from Cache Valley, but her husband was. Chase Nielsen's widow up here. I think it's nice that she's here today, that we can remember her husband for what he did in World War II. And we also have Clyde Yates. Clyde, right here. Clyde, stand up. Clyde was in B-24s flying out of England for, what, 7 missions?
5th mission.
5th missions. And he was shot down and served in stayed in a prisoner of war camp for the rest of the war. And it's nice to have him here. He's a friend. He's an old friend. And then over here in one row, taking up quite a bit of a row, Carrie, stand up. Okay. Carrie, last name?
Wright.
Right, Carrie Wright. Her mother and dad and cousin are all from England. And Carrie has told me something about her gran, she calls it, who lives near a base in England back during the war. And maybe if I have some time left, if I give you any time, you can say a few words about what you can remember. But anyway, I think I better get started. I've got a bunch of overheads, I guess they're called overhead transparencies. When I was looking back there at the screen, so I'm legally blind. And everything looks like it's fuzzy to me. And I thought, that's not in focus. And how are these people going to see anything? But I think what you'll see is going to be in focus. It's not Chris Black, who's a brother, who's a nephew-in-law, is going to handle all that for me. And I'm going to do something. I'm legally blind, and I went through the blind rehab center down in Palo Alto, California, for 7 weeks, teaching me how to use them, get the best use out of what vision I have left. And one of the things they wanted me to learn is how to use this thing right here. But they tell me never point with your cane. Because you knock somebody over, but I'm going to do some pointing. Back over here. Okay. What I'll start doing is bringing you up to date, or up to the end of my flying career. In 1934, I think it was, I had my first airplane ride. A Waco UPF-7 landed, well, it was flying over our hometown in Keystone Heights, Florida, 150 people, and circled around town quite a bit, and then disappeared behind some trees. And I jumped on my bicycle and I rode like crazy to get out there. And he landed in a field, in a pasture, and he called me over. He says, "You want to go up my airplane?" I said, "Yes." So he says, "Okay, all you got to do is throw out these pieces of paper when we fly over your town, telling the people to come on out, and I'll give them an airplane ride for $2 or something like that." So that's the first time I had association with an airplane, and it started me off wanting to fly. Okay, Chris. When I was 18 years old, I was walking down the street. saw this sign and went right in and enlisted. How many of you remember this poster? Yeah, quite a few. But anyway, I went in to enlist, and they said, yeah, we'd be happy to, but you don't weigh enough. You got to gain 8 pounds before we can sign you up. I weighed 28 pounds, and I was supposed to weigh 136. I was 5'11". I had been substitute tackle on my high school football team. A tackle weighing 128 pounds. You can imagine what our record was. Okay, Chris, next one. This is a typical crew member. Ain't he cute? Okay, Chris. And the next most important, prominent person in World War II was, whoops, this guy. Who remembers Kilroy? Yeah, okay. Everywhere you went, Kilroy had gotten there ahead of you. Okay, Chris. This is my B-17 crew. But to get to this point, had basic training, was called in September of '42, had basic training in Miami Beach, then went to a girls' college in Maryville, Tennessee. We had to take some tests, and then we had to take get some more education in mathematics and physics before they would even consider us for flying training. And then we had to go to Nashville, Tennessee to get reprocessed, another physical exam, and they found out there that I was not qualified because of my eyes to be a pilot, a combat pilot. So I got into radio school. Went to radio school in Sioux Falls, South Dakota in the middle of the winter. Went to gunnery school in Yuma, Arizona in the summer. A story about gunnery school. Well, back up to the girls' school. We thought that was really something. There were going to be 40 of us there in this girls' school. And it was a nurses' school. And boy, we wanted to get acquainted. They came out with a rule: no fraternization at all. You're here to learn. They're there to learn. We can't have you intermingling and getting into problems. So we were just not able to communicate with them. We found out if we got sick and had to go to the infirmary, then we could go over there. And they were nurses training, and so some guy discovered that if you put a bar of GI soap under your armpit for a little while, you'd get a fever. Boy, we started getting fevers in a hurry. But those nurses, the teachers, knew what was going on, and they said, you can't come over unless your fever is 105 or something like that. So then back to Yuma, Arizona, gunnery training. We first started by just firing a shotgun at a standing thing or at clay pigeons, and then we fired from the back of a truck. And then they put us in a B-17. First time we'd been in a big ship like that. And we were flying down low, firing at a target that was being towed by another airplane. And one of the guys in the plane I was in started getting a little sick. And he said, I got to call the pilot and tell him that I got to go back to the base because I'm getting sick. And this one guy, joker, said, well, here, call this. And he reached over and he pulled a gadget that was smaller than this but black out of a little clip on the wall. And he said, you can, you know what this was for? Called a relief tube. Because if you're up in a B-17 for 10 hours, once in a while, you have to do number one, I guess. And so you do it in this, and it goes out through the bottom of the plane. And the ball turret gunners didn't like that, and when they come into their ball turret. But anyway, so he told this guy, he said, just call the pilot on this thing. Because the guy didn't know what it was. He said, hello, pilot. Hello, pilot. I gotta go back to the base, I'm feeling sick. Oh, pilot. That actually happened. I was not responsible for that, but that actually happened. So then we got through gunnery school and went back to Florida. I was really fortunate. I was born and raised in Florida, and I went back to Florida for crew training, and that's where I met these guys. And I won't ask you to figure out who. That's me right there. But now this picture has 9 of us. There were 9 members of the crew. The navigator, I mean the bombardier was in that picture there. Okay. So let's see, what's the next slide, Chris?
Riding under bomb range.
Let's wait for a minute on that. Okay. So we were able to pick up our airplane and in Savannah, Georgia, and fly to England. And it wasn't our airplane; it was just an airplane we were ferrying over there because, at the time we got over there, we didn't have a crew that stayed with an airplane at all. But anyway, we flew from Savannah, stopped in New York. I'll take time to tell you a story. As a radio operator, I had a huge radio set in the radio room, and then I had a trailing wire antenna that had about a 5-pound lead weight at the end of it, and it was on the end of about 250-foot long wire. You had to get the wire, let it out a long way sometimes to tune in the station that you wanted. But anyway, I was practicing with it on the way flying up the Atlantic coast, and I was just to see how far away I could find the radio station. I did find one in San Francisco. And I was so excited about we were going to land in New York. We flew over the Long Island Expressway and landed at Mitchell Field and got out of the airplane, and somebody came up and says, "Where's your trailing wire antenna?" Because some wire was hanging out. We had come over, landed over the Long Island Expressway with that 5-pound lead weight trailing behind us. I never heard anything about that, whether or not it caused any accident. But anyway, we went on and landed in Goose Bay, Labrador. We had to stay there because our gasoline tanks weren't working right. We didn't have enough fuel to fly all the way across the ocean like they normally would do. So we'd go from Goose Bay to Greenland. This is the briefing that we got in Goose Bay. There is a beacon at the mouth of the fjord at Bluey West 1, North Sarsarak. It's a low-frequency, low-power beacon. You go on a certain course until you pick that up on your radio, and then you follow that beacon until you come to the mouth of the fjord. You go into the fjord, make a right turn, a left turn, and a right turn. Then you'll see a wrecked ship in the water in that fjord. When you see that ship, turn left and land. That was the briefing we got. And you went around a big mountain thing, and there was a runway right there. You turn left and land, and so that was kind of an interesting thing. We finally went from there a couple of days later to Iceland, and then on to Wales, and left our airplane there, and then got assigned to Poddington. Okay, Poddington is the air base that I was at, the 92nd Bomb Group. These are the guys that really worked hard. They're loading bombs and things like that. They had a lot of fun doing that, as you can see. One more. This was... yeah. This is just a little bit ahead of time, but this picture was taken much later than my time over there. Okay, go ahead. This is a B-17 from our group. The Triangle B, that's the 92nd Bomb Group. We were actually the second bomb group to get to England. When they went over the first time, they flew direct from Newfoundland into Scotland, non-stop. But we couldn't do that because of our gas tank problem. But Triangle B is, in fact, this is a picture I had on the back of my jacket. And Carrie over here, who's from England, saw me when I was getting on a bus going to BYU one day and recognized the fact that it was a B-17, and I thought that's really interesting. a girl from college would know what a B-17 was all about. So that's how we got acquainted, okay? All right, now a little bit about what happens the night before a mission. We don't know that we're going to go on a mission. We just don't know. Generally, there are some people on the base that did. But about 3 o'clock in the morning, a man would come and turn on all the lights in our Quonset hut. Say, everybody up. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Breakfast is at 4. Briefing is at 5. Takeoff is at 6. So we would go through that routine, and we'd get out to the airplane about 6 o'clock, a little before 6 o'clock, get all our gear stored. And by the way, breakfast was almost always powdered eggs and powdered milk. But anyway, got some response to that up here. How many of you have ever heard a B-17 engine start up on a cold morning? There are a few. Let me tell you, it makes a sound. I tried to record that so I could play it here, but I couldn't get the recording done just right. It sounds like a sick person who's got emphysema and bronchial problems. It starts out like kind of like a and then it'll start. Now, on a mission, some of the missions we flew on were what they call maximum effort. That meant when they got the word down from headquarters, get every airplane that you have that can fly on this mission. And sometimes that would mean as many as 48 airplanes. We had 4 squadrons. Each squadron had 12 to 15 different airplanes. And what I'm getting at is we get all those airplanes out on the field, starting their engines, and the sound of, actually in some cases, as many as 50, because they would have a couple of them standing by in case 1 or 2 couldn't make it. And 50 airplanes, 200 B-17 engines, the ground is just vibrating. Just it makes a sound like you'll never forget. The only other sound in the Air Force that you will always remember, I think, is the sound of a P-51 when it's flying by. But anyway, that sound of all those airplanes just vibrating the ground is really something. Okay, then I won't try to get into the analysis of how they decided who's going to fly where and which plane's going to do what. But it took a lot of planning for these men to do that. They did it all night long. We'd line up. The first plane would be out on the taxiway first, and then the second plane is right behind him. And all these planes trying to get into the position they're supposed to be in when they get into the air. Then they take off about every 30 seconds. Do you remember 30 seconds, Clyde? Is that about right?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, about every 30 seconds. And the first plane would take off and go way out on a straight line, and then start making a gradual left turn. The second plane would go out, but not quite as far, and he would turn. And then the third plane, and they would try to form up an element, and then it would just circle around the base until every plane was off the ground and in the right formation. And then they would go to a point somewhere over the coast of England, rallying point, where all of the 8th Air Force was trying to get there at the right time and have the first group out across the channel, and then the second group, and so forth. And they tried to do that, get all in formation. What people know now, General LeMay was a Colonel LeMay of the 305th Bomb Squadron, and he came up with the idea of getting the airplanes to fly close together when they're over German territory, German-held territory, to protect against the fighters that would be coming. And so we tried to fly really tight formation. This is just a very small portion of a bomb group that's going over to Germany. Okay, Chris. And we're starting to close in. This is not from our group. You can see this circle Y. But anyway, starting to get close together. Okay, you can see some down below. Some of these planes were 1,000 feet down below. Okay, Chris?
That's what we thought for.
Now this is some scattered bombers, and these things right in here are a little burst of flak. Next one, I'll show you what flak actually, where that word comes from, an acronym. It's a German acronym. Did anybody know German in here? Can you pronounce that? Flugzeug?
Flugzeug.
Flugzeugabwehr? Abwehr? Cannon. Kanone, or something like that. It means anti-aircraft cannon. The 88 millimeter anti-aircraft cannons that the Germans used were just amazing. We were terrified of those things. And back, okay, Chris, the next one. On the very first mission, that doesn't show it really well, but there's probably 100 or more bursts of flak. We were flying along, and we were going to Cologne. And I looked out my little window. As a radio operator, I have just a little window on my side of the airplane. It was on the other side too, but I couldn't see out of that one. And I could only see what I could see out of that window. All the other members of the crew, dressed as the bombardier, right up in the very nose of the airplane, could see everything. The top turret gunner could see all the things that are above the horizon. The ball turret gunner could see all the things down below the horizon. And then the waist gunners could see a great big area out each side. The tail gunner could see everything in the back, all the way to the ground. I could only see just a little bit outside of my window. But I saw that. And we were flying along like this, and I was looking up, and I saw that, and I said to myself, boy, I'm sure glad we're not going there. And we're flying, and all of a sudden, head right for it. Oh, man. But you know, I was so young, I didn't really know enough to be scared. But anyway, okay, Chris. And when we got there, well, before we got there, in the late 40s, 42 and 43, there were no fighters, American fighters, that could go all the way to the target with us. They could fly as far as a little bit into France, then they'd have to turn around and go back. We'd run out of fuel. And the bombers in those days, like when you've heard of the Schweinfurt mission sometimes, some of you have, the 60 bombers lost in one mission. They would get attacked by the German fighters all the way in, and then they'd have to go through the flak, and then as soon as they got out of the flak, the German fighters would come again, because fighters weren't going to fly into that flak. And so they lost a lot of airplanes from fighters as well as from the flak. When we were over there, we had the P-51, which is that beautiful thing right there. And called Little Friends, and it could go all the way with us. But it still didn't keep the fighters away. It just helped to keep the fighters away. But we still got some fighters. Okay, that's just the 51. One more, Chris. Another, oh, these are P-51s that are flying overhead. We would be flying along on a course, set course, at about 150 or 160 miles an hour. The P-51s fly 360 sometimes. So they can't slow down to keep up with us. So they would maintain their speed in case the fighters would come up. They would be at speed, at fighting speed, and they could attack them. But then they would go back and forth across. S-turns across us, and we could look up and see those things, and that was a good, good feeling to see the little friends up there. Okay, Chris? But when the Germans did come up, we used to go through aircraft identification, and they would flash a silhouette on the screen, and we would have to know what that airplane was. And they would just flash it up there and back, and just like that. Now we have to know the difference between a P-51 and an ME-109, a German plane. You can see there is quite a difference. But still, when it's like that, it's hard to see. One more for the P-47 to show you. The P-47 here it has a rotary engine and a blunt nose, and the FW-190 has a rotary engine and a blunt nose. That was a little bit harder to tell which one. Are you going to shoot at it or what? So we have to go through that a lot. Okay, Chris. I didn't, because I didn't have a gunner. When you had on a couple of missions that I remember, we had at least 1,000 bombers in the air. I think I remember reading on the internet somewhere that on one mission there were 2,000 bombers going to Berlin, with about half that many fighters. And all of those engines left condensation trails behind them, and they just whitened the sky. The Germans called this, well, since our planes were aluminum, they called it the aluminum overcast. That was a name that they gave those. Okay, Chris. One mission, our tail gunner said all of a sudden, "What the hell was that?" And then they repeated it, because he had never seen one of these things. This is a German Me-262 jet fighter. It was the only jet fighter in World War II. Nobody knew about that airplane until all of a sudden it appeared and started coming through the bombing missions at just tremendous speed. And so that was about the jet fighters. Okay, let me see, what's the next one now? Okay, bombs away. The planes are pretty much scattered out, but that shows gets the idea of how many bombs there were. I think there were 16 500-pound bombs in our B-17s on the normal load. Okay, Chris. I think there's one more bombs away thing. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's go. Wait. Put that back.
You want that back?
Yeah.
You changed your mind.
Yeah. Those aren't airplanes. Those are bombs. Things happen sometimes. Sometimes we were at some level, some group was up here and some group was down below and some group was down below. And once in a while, something like this would happen. Okay, the next. As you can see, a plane